I'm really pleased to introduce Dimitrios Dimopoulos, Head of ESG at Piraeus Bank in Greece and co-chair of the UNEP FI Banking Board, to share a few words. Dimitrios.
I feel really honored to be kicking off the next panel sessions representing the UNEP FI Banking Board. So grabbing this opportunity, I would like to share some highlights on the principles for responsible banking, the world's foremost sustainable banking framework. It has been an important year for the framework. The PRB celebrated its 5th birthday in September. As we celebrated 5 years of the principles, we shared how signatory banks are putting the principles into practice and the resources UNEP FI provides to help with their implementation journey. Just a few highlights from the anniversary campaign. We now have over 350 banks, representing well over half of the global banking assets, and all these banks have chosen to implement the principles. 83 countries are represented among the membership. 113 of those banks have also committed to the Net Zero Banking Alliance, the climate acceleration program of UNEP FI. We can see that leading responsible bankings are aligning their business strategy and sustainability ambitions, working across 4 priorities: climate, nature, healthy and inclusive economies, and human rights. They are progressing from impact analysis to actionable implementation. They are embracing climate, client, customer, and stakeholder engagement. They are driving change at scale, using their influence. UNEP FI has a very clear vision for what a responsible banking sector looks like, and it has now published a responsible banking blueprint to help guide us. Following an in-depth strategic project and framework review, we now have a holistic implementation journey with defined steps that banks can follow under each of the 6 principles, including leading practices in responsible banking. A key message as we launch the evolved journey is this: the PRB is a strategic sustainability framework, providing clear, adaptable, and credible solutions tailored to banks at any stage of their sustainability journey, regardless of size or location. As a board, and together with the Secretariat team, we have also taken care to understand the evolution in the sustainable finance landscape, which looks very, very different from what it was in 2019, when we first launched the principles. We have listened carefully to banks, and especially to how their regulatory environments have changed. The framework has adapted accordingly under the ongoing guidance of civil society too, and without losing the original spirit or ambition of the principles for responsible banking. With that, I would like to hand over to Lara and to the panels to begin. Thank you very much.
So very pleased to welcome on stage Johanna Dichtl, Implementation Guidance Lead within the banking team here at UNEP FI, and Johanna will introduce her panel.
Great. Thanks for being here. Thanks for staying so long. We know it's already late. There are 2 more sessions, and both are about clients and customers. About how banks can create synergies, how they can encourage sustainable practices, how they can really accompany their clients in their transition towards more sustainable business practices, as well as also technologies. So why is the work with clients so important? This morning we heard Irene Hemskirk from the ECB say, because the financial sector can only be as green as the economy. So partnering with clients is essential in assessing and managing the impacts of banks, also in understanding risks and opportunities, and also in a way achieve the bank's sustainability targets themselves. Client engagement as such is a crucial element of responsible banking, as is actually reflected by the fact that there is a principle number 3, focused on clients and customers, and it is also a main driver to foster sustainable finance. Banks who under the PRB framework have analyzed their impact, have set targets, they really focus on implementation now. So the focus is on delivery via transition plans, via action plans, as was also re-emphasized in a strategic process that we've been through in the last year called the PRB 2030 process, which all 4 institutions on stage have been a part of. One outcome of this PRB 2030 process was guidance on client engagement, which is something we'll deep dive on today's panel here, with insights from practitioners, from banks themselves, on innovative strategies, on best practice, on how to enhance client engagement. This is the first session. There will be a second session which will deep dive particularly into client engagement on social issues, so encourage you to stay for both sessions. So with that, let me introduce the panelists. So I'm starting with you, Shargiil, because you're sitting next to me. This is Shargiil Bashir, the Chief Sustainability Officer and Executive Vice President at First Abu Dhabi Bank. FAB is also a member of the PRB and the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and Shargiil himself is a member of the UNEP FI Banking Board and the co-chair of the NISBA, the Net Zero Banking Alliance steering group. We have next to him Christine Würfel from Raiffeisen Bank International from Austria, also a bank and engaged member of the Principles for Responsible Banking, member of the PRB 2030 process. Then we have Lara Mesa, Global Head of Sustainability at Santander since 2018. Santander is a founding member of the PRB and the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And Lara herself is also the representative from Europe in the Global Steering Committee. And then last but not least, we have Susan Barron representing Barclays. Barclays is as well a founding member of the PRB as well as the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So without further ado, let's get started. Each and every one of you, please share some insights. Why is client engagement so important for your banks? And can you also share, some insights how you have set up client engagement? Should we get started with you, Shargiil?
Thank you, Johanna, and thank you very much for having me in this discussion. And happy to add some diversity to this panel as well, so that's good. I think when we discuss client engagement, I think it's important to remember that client engagement is the whole core and foundation of banking overall, right? And I think it's important to remember that this is something that banks have been doing for hundreds of years and sits in our foundation. I guess what is new is that now we start engaging on a topic that is relatively new when it comes to climate or the topic of sustainability, and how is that engagement taking place. And we are trying to engage in a topic where we might not be expert as well, and it's something that we are co-creating together with our clients. What's important for us then when we are engaging with our clients is, first of all, to understand their maturity on this journey. Because just like when you're discussing with your clients on any other topic, it's important to understand that, what's the starting point and how is it that you're going to engage with them from that perspective. So for us, the approach we have taken is that we try to assess our clients and their maturity on their journey to the transition. And when I say transition, it's not only a green transition, it's also a transition on, let's say, technology, AI, and the overall transition they're going through in the current times, and what is their maturity on that. And the way we do this is basically to assess and say, based on some qualitative and quantitative data, that how mature are these clients specifically. And based on their maturity, we can then figure out, okay, what's the starting point on this discussion? How can we support them in this transition specifically, and what's the topic we're going to engage with them on this? And I think it's very important to remember as part of this process that you're going to have a conversation with mature clients who has a transition strategy in place, who are maturing on the topic and very well aware of the challenges they face. And then you're also faced with having a conversation with clients who have not even started and does not understand the challenges they are facing or are going to face if they don't start the transition process. So for us, the approach differs a little bit in which category the clients will fall in. And we basically rank their maturity for low, medium, and high, and our conversation depend on that, whether they are low, medium, and high, and how we start that conversation with them, and how we can support them from that perspective.
Thanks so much, Shargiil. Christine, how do you do it at RBI?
Yeah, thank you very much. I very much like what you said on this co-creation, on client engagement between banks and clients, because I think this is really key. And what we saw that, of course, depending on the maturity of the clients, of course, you can then cluster also the clients internally as really supportive, transformative, and restrictive, and then also to steer your own portfolio in this respect. With your own policies, your own portfolio steering. And then there are also new formats, dialogue formats now, really successful stories. Perhaps I can tell you an example from now, end of November, what we organized internally in Austria, in our headquarters, was a biodiversity day. It was the first time that we put nature into the focus of the discussion with a lot of stakeholders from the public and the private institutions. UNEP FI was also there with a great speech by Verena Krause. And actually, a lot of customers also joined us. And the interesting thing was that internally, our industry leads, so the forefront, so to say, they were also there with the clients, but the clients were not represented by their treasurers, but by their sustainability officers. So actually our counterparts, but in the industry. And normally the industry lead has a direct contact with the treasurer to sell them the products. But in this case, in nature, so to get this awareness, to really discuss what is the currency of nature, what KPIs can we find, what projects, what profitable projects we can perhaps also create together, it was quite obvious that these sustainability officers in the industries are really the key persons to internally then pursue or really connect with their treasurers to get it fly at the end. So this was an interesting step, also on the understanding how industry and banks are here in a proper client engagement, to include sustainability officers because they are closer to the ESG topics, and then interlink them with the treasurers to make it happen, so to say.
Thanks, Christine. Very interesting. Lara, you're already taking... I don't think you need to do any. Does it work?
I think so, yeah.
Very good.
It works.
How about Santander?
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you for having Santander today. I'm really pleased to be with you. So as it has been said, yes, first let's remind that client engagement is very natural to of course, banking business. No? I still remember the great frustration of colleagues at the start of the pandemic when they were really facing, they couldn't visit clients as it was part of the daily work. No? But we are today talking about client engagement, of course, in the context of climate and transition. And as you were saying, Johanna, when opening, the truth is that we cannot become green on brown economies. No? Santander, we are mainly present in Europe and America. In our core markets, we have a relevant presence, so we cannot do cherry picking. We really, as I said, our balance sheet cannot be green if the economies we serve do not transition themselves. No? So here is when this client engagement that is already natural and happening on banking business, take an additional, effort, no, and require an additional approach. So how we are addressing it and what is the challenge? First is understanding their needs. We need to understand where our clients are and what are their needs and how do they connect with others' needs that we are aware and how we can better serve them. No, this is so important. Then, of course, the challenge is not financing the green. We do like and do finance the green, but it's screening the rest. And on this, of course, the assessment of transition plans is very important. The assessment of transition plans that are still early stage tool on which understanding how complete, comprehensive ambition they are requires, of course, just performing analysis on reporting availables, but also talking to the teams and understanding what are the plans ahead, no, and how feasible they look like. No? So all in all, of course, going back to that is the relevance of client engagement today, and is becoming really fundamental for us to progress.
Thanks so much, Lara. And Susan, and I remember, I just noticed I forgot to mention that unless the other three on stage, we have an actual client-facing representative here. So Susan Barron is the Managing Director and Global Co-Head of the Sustainable Banking Group. Therefore, you play a different role within the bank, but this is the vital role. So great to have you on that stage. So how do you set up client engagement within Barclays?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and great to be here. And I think really I just echo what my fellow panelists have said. I think within banks, you know, the core foundation of much of what we do is those client relationships and building those long-term trusted partnerships with our clients. It is about understanding clients' needs, but it is also trying to enable through those partnerships and through other tools, finding ways to build tailored financial solutions or engage in different dialogue. So for us, what we have found was really helpful is trying to, you know, incorporate much of what we're trying to do across all of the businesses and thus engaging directly with the clients through the establishment of dedicated sustainable finance teams that have specific expertise and can sort of look to partner with those existing banking clients and existing coverage teams. Also trying to use specific tools which help sort of support client engagement. So specifically around transition plans, you know, understanding clients' pathways and commitments around climate, also looking to sort of delve into and understand the regional and industry specificities that I think is really important to not overlook. And last but not least, it is about not only sort of looking at what our bank's overall climate commitments are, but trying to translate those so that every single individual working in the bank, and we know we try and do this all the time at Barclays, feels that they have a role to play in partnering with clients to enable the transition, to enable clients moving towards, you know, net zero, but also to enable, you know, the individual banks that I'm sure all of our panelists here work at to try and meet our own commitments. So it's a multifaceted approach, but I think in each case it is leveraging off those core trusted client relationships and just really building to deepen them.
Susan, you mentioned one very important point, and let's get started with a little bit like the internal setup that is needed for successful client engagement, and this is also one of the elements that is laid out in the PRB guidance. The aspect of, you know, knowledge transfer from sustainability officers to client-facing roles, the ones ultimately really talking to the clients. They need to understand what they're talking about. So there is like an aspect of training, of internal capacity building needed, which is basically crucial for successful client engagement. So, Lara, I'm looking at you. What's been your experience with exactly that, with mobilizing front office teams, with engaging frontline colleagues on the sustainability agenda, broadly speaking?
Thank you, Johanna. So I think that we as practitioners of sustainability are used to say that we need to put sustainability thinking into business. But of course, my experience from aiming to engage the business into the sustainability challenges is that we also need to put business thinking into sustainability and understand what are the drivers, and what are the drivers that business are willing to address, of course, is where they see opportunities to really serve their customers and where they really see opportunities either to enlarge their capabilities to improve the solutions that they can provide to them, or the deepness of those solutions. So I would say that the best way to engage the business is when they listen to their own customers, or also stakeholders such as investors or others, expecting from them, asking to them, I'm facing this challenge, are you ready to help me on doing so? And that is great, because then there's not a role for us from sustainability to convince them. They get convinced themselves by hearing their most important stakeholders, directly their clients. They are facing challenges and they need and they expect their bank, their partner, to help them. And I think this is something we have experienced quite often over the last years. It may be that is not always the case, and then from sustainability also, what you need to be equipped is to anticipate trends in the market to the business on where do you see opportunities coming, how you are seeing peers, practitioners moving, and how do you understand that it's important that we get equipped, and that sometimes, whether it is a demand-driven or a supply-driven, some of the trends you may see, you can also provoke that need from the customers come. There can be also, of course, regulation, maybe also an additional driver, because of course it's something we need to comply with. But I would say that when talking about business engagement, when regulation is really working as an enabler, it can help. When it is more seen like a pain and just complain, it can be even just perceived as a burdensome, and it doesn't increase the appealing to further engage on this endeavor. And then on the approaches, as I said, of course, is supporting the business when they understand they need to provide solution, is making them see the opportunity if this is not yet the case, and then talking their language, as I mentioned, and putting business thinking into sustainability. If you can work through your financial planning, strategic discussions, the tools that they are used to work with, you put in their language and into their own procedures, the kind of rationale about the sustainability opportunities. So that, I think, proves to be effective. And of course, you then have also the rewards or the incentives framework that are also helpful. So when the goals of the business teams are related to the accomplishment of sustainability goals, that is, of course, also an approach that proves to be effective in our experience. Thank you.
May I have a follow-up question? You mentioned the anticipation of trends in the market. Did you have some examples, specific examples of current trends in mind, or trends in the past where that worked well?
Yeah, I would say I think with corporate and investment banking customers, what our colleagues say is more of the example that I was mentioning before. Clients were coming to us at the same time we see things coming and asking us for solutions. So your clients already perceive. Maybe when you are more moving into the more corporates, SMEs, individuals, it may be perfectly the case, and we may want to comment on it later, that they are not so aware that there may be an opportunity to them to make sustainability changes in their habits, in the assets they buy, in the way they behave, in their decisions they make. And you have the opportunity to make them aware of this and for them to understand where is the opportunity and then you to offer them solutions.
Thanks so much, Lara. Christine, how about you? What's your approach internally to mobilize really like the frontline colleagues? How have you framed that or set that up? Like what approaches have worked well?
I mean, when I can remember some years ago, we started with mandatory ESG trainings for all. In the meantime, really also the last weeks, it happens that business by itself, they organized skill-up trainings on the two topics on ESG and artificial intelligence, so the two big topics, so to say. And this was not a push and a mandatory push from us. This was really an own wish to get here deep into it. Of course, my team and myself, we contributed a lot on also on nasty topics like the CSRD, what is needed, what our clients need. But actually it was very much going into this direction, how to support here the client in their transition, also on specific industries, on specific opportunities, sectors, products, services. So what is already on the market, what is in development. So this was really good to see that it's already a bit in the genes of the business colleagues to be interested herein. And as I repeated from before, what I said, this new format of client engagement, which also very often includes other stakeholders, be it from the public side, be it from NGOs, to really get the knowledge into it, especially new topics like nature, biodiversity. There we really saw that actually also the industry, the client, they had the same questions as we had. How can we make really here a business case out of it? Which nature currency should be used to be here nature positive? Because on climate you have CO2, but on nature. So all these really important questions that two stakeholders then come together and create something new. I think this was one of the lessons learned, and we will follow up on these really cooperative approaches.
Thanks so much. So let's move on to the clients themselves. So not only that internal setup, but the client engagement itself. What strategies have worked well in the engagement of clients? And I'm looking at you, Susan, since this is your daily job. What resonates with clients from your own experience?
So I break it down. I would say there are a couple of things that are encouraged to consider to do, and there are a couple of things that caution where we've all sort of made errors. I think the first is start with the why. So show clients why sustainability, sustainable finance, climate is important to them. Whether it is because of regulatory requirements, whether it is because of their business competitiveness, whether it is indeed because of their own financial resilience. I think the next piece as well is that we found it really valuable where we translate those discussions into terms that resonate with the clients that you're actually speaking with. So maybe not assuming a level of knowledge around sustainability, but trying to translate it into financial metrics, potentially. Cost savings, revenue attribution, revenue growth. But I think, and also where possible, is to leverage data and case studies. So real-world practical examples where they can see their peers have had successes or their peers have had potential learnings. I think within all of that, and this is just as we were sort of alluding to at the beginning, is really not to make assumptions about our clients. I think sustainability and climate, although still relatively nascent, is something we increasingly discuss. And so I believe clients' level of knowledge is, quite significant. And I think that's really important because it's still to align with that sort of trusted long-term client relationship, but also to ensure seeking information and a degree of understanding about where they are on their own journeys, where they potentially have their own challenges. But at least for me personally, the other thing I would really always encourage is not to overpromise. So we all are, working and wanting to partner with clients to achieve specific objectives, to reach 1.5 degrees. But I think we also need to partner to sort of come together and better understand the different specific challenges and informational content. So the sort of pragmatic approach is equally important, because out of that, hopefully it'll also mean those partnerships will create potentially new financial solutions and opportunities that will again then just reinforce why sustainability for clients is important.
Are there also some common points of friction or that you notice in the customer interactions, or how would you address them?
So I think a lot of common points, and were also sort of touched on in a couple of the earlier discussions today, is the perception that sustainability and sustainable finance is an economic cost. And really trying to figure out how to, look to analyze and debrief on those particular aspects. I think there are also other points of friction sometimes is the perceived complexity around sustainability, sustainable finance, data, reporting, regulation. And I think there again, it is, partnering with individuals that have specialisms in those areas to try and sort of all come together through that. Last but not least, I know another point which has come through, in a couple of discussions earlier today, is another friction point potentially is around the accuracy and availability of data. I think we're all increasingly encouraging clients to, increase their reporting and, provide more details, but that does come with some challenges potentially around the availability of data. And so I think that's where that open dialogue between all the parties is really key to trying to sort of find out where those friction points are, where potentially others have found solutions to them, and then potentially work towards addressing where there are no solutions currently, but potentially there are lots of, various market stakeholders who could look to identify. And the role of AI is a really important part, I think, of that particular friction point.
We can later on still get to the role of AI and digitalization. But before that, I'd also like to ask you, Shargiil, about what from your experience, and you operate in the MENA region mostly, not only, but this is where you're headquartered, what resonates with clients from your experience?
No, I will echo the points Susan made as well, right? I think when you're dealing with clients who are mature, it's not that much about the why anymore. It's more about how and what it needs to be done. While if you're dealing with clients that are medium-sized SMEs who are just starting their journey, it's very much about the why. Why is it that this is still important? And I fully agree that especially when you move into the medium-sized SME level of clients, the economic cost still is very much the discussion point. I think what has been important for us is to say, how do we bring these clients together and help them raise awareness from that perspective? And I think our role as financial institutions is, of course, to provide the financing and provide our expertise where we can, but it's also about raising awareness of our clients on this topic as well, because I think that's the part of the engagement that is really important. A couple of examples of those. So we decided at one point to say that, financing is a commodity for us, and we will continue doing that and serving all our clients. But besides that, how can we support our clients besides that? And one of the things is, of course, that, we can start partner with them, because our clients can have solutions that can help us in our sustainability journey. So that's one approach we are taking with them. but they might also have solutions that can help other of our clients on their transition journey. So how can we put out a program that they can support and link these clients together from that perspective and bring this value chain together? So basically what we started was that over the past year we've held 2 what we call sectorial summits, where we have focused on some specific high emitting sectors. We started with the aviation sector, and then we moved into the construction and real estate sector, where we decided to bring together, hosted by us, the whole value chain for that specific sector. Which mean that these are your largest clients, these are their suppliers, this is policymakers, etc., for those specific sectors, to bring them together to say what are the challenges that the largest clients and companies in this sector are facing, what are the suppliers to this sector, what are the challenges they're facing as part of this transition, how can the policymakers help, how can we as a financial industry help them, from that perspective. And those dialogues have been very, very useful, and happily what we have seen is that now the sectors have started to take up this approach themselves. So you know, they are now reaching out to us and say, how can we collaborate on a follow-up for these discussions as well? So I think it's also our responsibility to bring these clients, because we as financial industry have touch point to all kind of clients, right? Whether they're large, medium, small, individuals, across different industry, across geographies. How can we bring them together and share that knowledge as well? And another example I would like to highlight that has helped us as a do thing. One of the challenges we were facing is that very early on in this journey, that when we were trying to engage with our clients, the maturity on the specific people we were speaking with on the topic of sustainability was not very high, right? So if we were dealing with a CFO from another company or the treasury and so on, they were not probably in a place on their journey to have a discussion around sustainability and why that was important. So we basically, together with the Imers Foundation in the UAE and IMD, based here as well, started an executive education program on sustainability, where we are offering our clients, strategic important clients to us, to take their future leaders, you know, CFO levels or probably future CFOs, future treasuries, to come through this program where they're understanding why is it that sustainability will play such an important part in their future decision making. So we are basically preparing them for these future decisions that they need to take. We have been through 4 cohorts now, and now we're evaluating and seeing, you know, how do we continue with this program? How can we further enhance it? So I think it's important that we as financial sector bring so much more than just our products. And that's also important, that when we're engaging with our clients, that it's not only about the product aspect that we are offering them, because so many others can do that, but what is the added value we can contribute with, which can be raising awareness and you know, supporting them in their transition through that awareness piece.
Thanks, Shargiil. What I had were approaches that very much are about bringing clients to the room, also raising awareness, summits, you mentioned the Biodiversity Day and things like that. Now, of course, there are many different types of clients. It's easier, I'd say, with large corporate clients, but the backbone of the economy tend to be SMEs, really mid-caps. So I'm looking at you, Christine. How do you go about this? How do you deal with this, you know, crucial customer type, which of course there are more of them, therefore, you know, in scale, more difficult how to deal with that. What's your engagement strategy towards mid-caps and SMEs?
Thank you. Yeah, very good question, an important question, because as you said, actually these SMEs or also mid-caps, which are actually not in the forefront on the regulation to deliver here sustainability targets and metrics, are really key for making the impact in the economy. And actually they are faster sometimes than the big companies. So really if you can convince this segment in the industry, then ESG would easily fly, so to say, because as you said, they are the backbone. But, and here the maturity, as already said, is not a given fact. Very often you do not discuss the how, but the why. and therefore I think there is a lot of potential. And actually, where we are active in Central and Eastern Europe, it's even more difficult to really get this big portion of the industry included. I mean, here it's the same like also with the corporates, the big ones. You have to engage, you have to bring the right people together, and as said, perhaps it's already repetitive, but I'm really convinced that the topic can only be solved if the public, if the authority, if the governments, if really the policy makers, the industry, and here also the financial services industry, then supported by IFIs and development banks, whatever, really put here all together their strength and their products and services to make tangible solutions, and then also to help. And perhaps also what we saw now with SMEs, it's a lack of capacities, of also resources to take care about it. And of course, then it's also really the nightmare of tools and existing measures, how you can do it best. So it's really sector specific, and I think here it's really needed a guided hand, to say, for SMEs to get rid out of this jungle and really to get then the right solution, pragmatic solutions, to define here a pathway. I think this is really important, and especially for this backbone of the economy, this cooperation between the public and the private sector.
I saw you nod, Shargiil. What's your approach? What do you think?
No, I think I echo a lot of the points, because with the SMEs, the why is still very important, and having a discussion around the why. And I think, again, that's probably one of the topics, because as you mentioned, Johanna, SMEs are the backbone of the economy in most places, right? It's a huge number of employment that they contribute with in every society. So how we support with them, and I think the partnership between the public sector and private sector is a very important point that is specifically for this sector to support with them. From us, what we've helped was that from a COP28 perspective, we initiated a program with the Women Business Coalition COP28 team on the SME Climate Hub, which is basically a program that was launched back at COP26 specifically, which to the SMEs that are committing towards Race to Zero, where you then go and offer them for free training, carbon calculator, different tools that then will support them in their journey on sustainability. So we partnered on that. That has been very helpful, because that gives the foundational information, because a lot of the times when you're having the engagement with the SMEs, they'll say, okay, they understand the why, and then they say, okay, so how do I move forward now? So what's the steps I need to take, and how do I take them? And they don't have the privilege, like a lot of us, to have sustainability teams and a big support system for them. So what are the steps I need to take now? So I think what we managed with the SME Climate Hub was to say, now you have the tools as well, right? So you understand the why, here are the tools, the foundation that will help you move forward from that perspective. And it has been relatively successful. I think that we still feel the challenge for a lot of companies is that, okay, but what's the economic value for me right now, right? So they're still missing the push, to be fair, a lot of the SMEs. So one of the things we are working on right now is to say, can we engage with some of our largest clients, where these SMEs are now the suppliers, to come back to them and say, what are the kind of incentives we can provide to them? And incentives, I don't mean financial incentives necessarily, but how could we support them with some other qualitative awareness tools, etc., to say that, encourage them to start this journey and support them from that perspective. So I think it's a little bit about raising awareness, providing the tools, and it's also about providing some kind of incentives, benefits that can support them on this journey. Because their biggest challenge is they don't have the resources, and whichever resource they might have, they prefer to reinvest in the business. And they often don't have those 3, 5, 10-year long plans to say, okay, that is why it's critical for me to start this journey, right? Often they just have a year-by-year kind of a view. And a lot of them at this point does not care about where the world stands in 2030 from a sustainability perspective. For them, it's more about what does 2025 look like, and maybe they're considering 2026. So I think we need to be realistic about that the journey for SMEs are very different. It might take longer. I do recognize that the maturity level across region is very different. So I know that SMEs in Europe are probably more mature than they are in Middle East and Africa, but still they're not at the same level as the large corporates. And I think we as an industry need to realize that and say, okay, how can we then best support them based on that starting point?
Thanks, Shargiil. Susan, about, I mean, you mentioned maturity level. It's not necessarily a correlation between the size, like SME, and level of maturity. It could be in some, but not like as a rule. How do you deal with, you know, clients that are less mature from a sustainability perspective? Why should they look to transition their business? What arguments do you use?
So, I mean, I think there are a number of different approaches that we have seen have resonated. I think if I was to pick two, one is around sort of peer comparison. I think we always find it quite impactful to be able to showcase to clients what their competitors are doing and then use that as an opportunity to engage as to why that might be the reason. So depending on where they are on their own sustainability journeys, it might afford the opportunity to discuss the why part of the question, or indeed moves more specifically to the how. I think the other part we have seen resonate quite well is to come up with a very clear, credible plan, which you can then partner with the client on around particularly trying to look to achieve small milestones and then really begin to scale from there. I think well, at least I've personally seen that's really helped, because I think where we've seen some companies are a little bit earlier in the journey, they potentially have a number of other priorities internally around which they're trying to navigate and prioritize. I think being able to show the ability and the success that can be achieved in taking certain actions will naturally encourage and support the scalability a little bit faster than otherwise.
Thanks, Susan. One comment to the room. So we have probably 5-ish minutes or so that we can use for Q&A, so you can mentally prepare if you have any questions. Just already a heads up to everybody. But I'd like to get to you, Lara, before we open up for questions from the room, because I mean, realistically, most of the client engagement is climate focused, climate mitigation focused. Well, we know that we're facing a triple planetary crisis. It's also biodiversity loss, it's pollution combined with social inequality. So the sustainability agenda as such is broad and it's interlinked, and in a way it's not only about greenhouse gas emissions. Do you already integrate topics like nature, like human rights, the opportunities of circular business models and so on? Do you already consider that in your client interactions? I'm looking at you, Lara, but also the rest. I'm very open to hear from you.
Thank you, Johanna. So yes, we're integrating elements. Of course, going back, and I echo my colleagues in the panel on the points they made. Depending on the maturity, of course, this is very different. No? I mean, what are the kind of questions and expectations you could pass to a corporate investment banking client, to an SME or individual is very different. I very much agree with comments that have been made on the why, the how, and the what when talking to SMEs is fundamental. Because if it is important, as I mentioned before, to present the opportunity on economic and financial terms, when it comes to SMEs, I would say that that is even more important, how they will be able to monetize whatever solutions you are proposing to them. And it is true that normally on the why, I mean, the SMEs many times they haven't really made the reflection about what sustainability can bring to them. So whether it is an opportunity for them to reduce costs, to increase competitiveness, to improve their proposition in terms of products and services, to better position to be part of a value chain, is something that many times they haven't thought about, or not to the specifics. Then, of course, is what is it that they can make? And here, again, being pragmatic. I mean, it's not, yes, we would always like to be some aspirational, but being pragmatic of what really makes sense to them at a certain time. And then on the how is so important. So it is the financial and the non-financial proposition to them. So how you can help them to assess their sustainability performance and identify elements that by which they could improve such. How to address reporting requirements that they may be subject to and not well equipped to face. How to measure their environmental principles. What kind of responsible procurement practices any client could expect from them. I mean, those are elements, no, by which you could open your customer's mind to opportunities that may have not identified, no, and then be ready to help them.
Thanks so much, Lara. Now, now I see. Okay, there is already a question to the gentleman, and there is another one. You please let us know who the question is to, and then we'll go to the lady in the back.
I think it's a suitable question for all of them, because in the end you're engaging with your client, and thanks for a fantastic panel discussion here. You're explaining your clients the transition, the why, the what, and the how. My question would be, is it actually for you a revenue opportunity, or is it actually an investment in your existing clients? Yeah? So with other words, while you're providing this service, yeah, are they clients paying you with business they used to do with you anyway, or that they deem to potentially do with your competition because they are providing these kind of answers to the questions, or what is it? So is it a revenue opportunity, or is it actually an investment in your existing clients?
Okay, yeah. I can start. I think for us, listen, it's an investment in our portfolio, in our clients, right? And I think as a financial industry, it's an investment in raising awareness overall. We of course hope that investment will pay off eventually down the line. But right now, when we do it, we don't invest and say, you know, we're investing 1 million and we're expecting to get that back within the next 12 months or 18 months. We do this because we need to raise that awareness specifically. It is our expectation that it will be a worthwhile business, but also is more importantly also from a risk aspect, because if our clients does not transition, potentially they might be out of business. And if they're out of business, that will create a loss for us, right? So I don't think that you can have that narrow view that is it a business opportunity, is it a risk only? I think it's about when you go through a transition, you need to do this, right? And I think the one of us, or the people here that are old enough to remember, I think banks went through this when the digitalization things came, right? The banks suddenly got the responsibility to support with the digitalization part, right? Making banking available through apps and through IT solutions and so on. And that was also a significant investment at the time from a banking perspective, which then paid off eventually. But at that time, you weren't doing it exactly because you didn't know when it's going to be a payoff. So at least from our perspective, we are investing in it to raise that awareness that we eventually believe will be a good business case down the line.
Very good. Thank you. You were next in line, and then I had another question here, and then we'll wrap up the session. I didn't see any more hands.
Thank you, and thank you for the very interesting and advanced discussion. I'm Dawn Sullivan from ELS Europe, Managing Director of an SME. So I have a question for you around engagement with SMEs. My biggest business partner is my accountant, and the accountancy firm that I work with becomes part of your business as an SME, because they cover a lot of areas for an SME, way more so than with a large entity. So when you have discussions with SMEs, do you invite their accountants along? Because believe me, accountants have great influence on how a director is going to take up certain types of discussion and narrative around risks and opportunities. So I just wanted to throw that out there to bring in all the stakeholders for the SME.
So the question is, do you invite accountants along? Do you invite accountants along in SME engagements? Is that something you would consider at that point?
Do we bring accountants to SMEs engagement? You mentioned? Of course, one way of approaching, of positioning us ourselves and also on understanding others depends on what is that they are reporting to the market. So I can tell you that within even our own organizations, accountants have a very important role to play in terms of sustainability reportings. In also level of assurance of the information we are providing to the market that is increasingly under scrutiny, and we need to provide it with same quality as financial information. So accountants are playing a role. So in that sense, to me, it wouldn't look strange that at some point in time they are part of conversations, but I wouldn't say as of now is the first person you would be expecting to sit with, no? You better, before need to understand what is the strategy and the plan, no, and the positioning in terms of competitiveness and plans ahead, no, from your clients.
And perhaps also, I think it's, of course, if you're talking with an SME, the accountants are key, because especially if you're explaining the why. Because the whole story about the CSRD now including the non-financial information into the annual report, the annual financial report, shows that the value of a company is dependent on the financial figures as well as on the non-financial figures. And therefore, it should be, of course, if you're explaining the why to an SME, it should be obvious that, of course, these information are now key for the future value of the SME, and therefore, yes, of course, they have to be onboarded.
Maybe I'll just say quickly, from an emerging market perspective, no. We don't bring accountants into that discussion. But I would say that typically what we are seeing in the SMEs, that typically the business owners or a wider layer of leadership are brought into those discussions. So it's not only the CFOs as an example. You will typically always have the CEO as a part of that conversation, or you might even have the chief operating officer, because it might be something about their packaging that can become more sustainable and so on. So you try to look into those opportunities. So a wider layer of leadership is invited to those conversations, but accountants is not something we bring into the conversation, at least in emerging markets as of this point.
Thanks all. So, and the very last question to the lady here.
Do you use, do you use BSI, behavioral science, or nudging in that engagement of clients?
I did not.
So sorry, was the question whether we use behavioral science in nudging the clients into that part? I don't think we do, to be honest. I wouldn't know in detail, but I don't think we use behavioral science, to be honest, in that. I don't think we are that advanced, to be fair, in that. But I don't know from the others.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think it's a really interesting question. I don't know if we unconsciously try to, by trying to sort of better understand our clients' specific needs. But I think it's definitely an interesting one to take away to see if there are better ways to incorporate it in.
Thank you. So, having a look at the time, I would like to wrap up the session now with a big thank you to the panelists. Thank you for sharing your insights on innovative strategies, on the do's and don'ts for effective communication with clients, on best practices for mobilizing front office teams and so on. So very interesting. And we're also very much looking forward to, the next steps in terms of real economy engagement. With that, big thank you to the panelists, big thank you to the audience.